We're here to make a new type of news.
New insights, new styles, and new topics every day.
We are News Generation.
Making news just for you. It's March 2nd here in Seoul. I'm Shin-Yoon, and this is News Generation, where we make the news at Arirang's very own open studio. Every morning, we'll discuss the top issues and latest current affairs affecting people in their 20s and 30s. Joining me in the studio is Kim Ji-young.
Good morning, you.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
Both are here to speak on behalf of those in their 20s and 30s. Now, let's start with the news feed of the day. We make a news feed based on the top trending hashtags and news articles on social media over the past 24 hours. Here they are. The first hashtag we'll look at is game items. South Korea's National Assembly has passed a new amendment to the Game Industry Promotion Act that will take effect from March next year. This amendment pushes game developers to reveal the probability of users obtaining rewards or items on their official website or in the games itself. So from next year, if game companies fail to disclose which items are available in loot boxes or how plausible it is for users to obtain them, they will be fined up to 151,000 US dollars or imprisonment for up to 2 years. The second hashtag is zero calorie. This news may come as a surprise to many people who are looking out for their diet by drinking zero-calorie drinks. A study published in the Natural Medicine Journal found that zero-calorie sweeteners can actually induce blood clotting, stroke, and heart attacks. The study found that people with existing risk factors for heart disease like diabetes were twice as likely to get a stroke or a heart attack due to erythritol, the sugar replacement used in these reduced sugar products. The last hashtag is independence. Yesterday was the 104th March 1st Independence Movement Day in Korea. On this day, we pay tribute to martyrs and patriots who devoted their lives to seek independence from colonial Japan. President Yoon Suk-yeol held a commemoration ceremony in Seoul, and there he stressed the need for Koreans to look back on their painful history so that it never happens again. He also said Japan has transformed from a militaristic aggressor into a cooperative partner of Korea. Now let's talk a bit more about the third hashtag, independence. It's tradition in Korea to hang the national flag taegukgi outside your house to commemorate the March 1st independence movement. And that's because people wave the national flag on this day as part of their peaceful protest against Japan's colonial rule. But local media outlets have reported how fewer and fewer households are following this tradition these days. New apartment buildings don't even build flagpoles outside each house anymore, citing how it could ruin the aesthetics of the building and safety measures. Many stores have also taken the national flag off their stock list because not many customers look for it on a regular basis. Now, I would like to include our panels into our newsfeed discussion, starting with Walter. Walter, you're from Australia, so I'm wondering, is there any national holiday where people hang the Australian flag outside their homes?
Yeah, there certainly is. They call it Australia Day, and a lot of people also like to carry around an Australian flag or wear green and gold as it's the colours that represent us. However, in the last few years, or at least in the last maybe decade or so, it's come under heavy scrutiny because many are expressing that celebrating this date, the 26th of January, is when the European settlers took over from the indigenous people. So some people are calling it Invasion Day. A lot of citizens are still for Australia Day. They don't want to change it. A lot of citizens do want to change it, or at least change the date. It's quite a controversial topic, actually, every time it comes around over the last 10 years. But yes, to answer your question simply, yes, there is.
I see. And Ji-young, you lived in Korea when you were young, so you must have seen a lot of taegukgi outside of apartment buildings, but now we're not seeing as much, right?
Yeah, I mean, even when I was young, we in our household, we had a taegukgi in this blue cylindrical container, the standard issue one, if you buy it from the local post office or something like that. And we'll take it out every national holiday. So official holiday, flag-bearing holidays are 7 days. Of the year, so a total of 7 days in a year where we officially raise the Korean national flag. And those are 3.1절, March 1st movement, 제헌절, Constitution Day, 광복절, National Liberation Day, as well as 개천절, National Foundation Day, 한글날, the Korean Language Day, as well as 현충일, Memorial Day, 국군의 날, Armed Forces Day. So quite a lot of days if I say it out loud. But those are the meanings of the days and the usual days we should be raising the flag.
Right.
And a lot of times, even I can see the change why people are raising the flag less nowadays.
Why?
I mean, when I was younger, we used to live in a sort of old school apartment building where they had sort of semi-balconies where it was definitely a little less safe, but then the height of the buildings were a lot lower. these days in Seoul or anywhere around in Korea, you get high rises as apartment buildings, residential quarters and things like that. So it is definitely a lot more dangerous. And most, with the newer designs of the buildings, most of the times they don't have balconies in Korea. So they don't really have the flagpoles outside of their own apartments where they can raise the flag. But I think a lot of the times nowadays they have the main gates or the office area of the apartment block where they will raise the flag for sure on these mentioned days.
Right, and a proposition that I would like to make is you can use social media. You can put up your national flag, upload stories and post. And that was our news feed for this Thursday. Let's now head into our main discussion. We're just coming back from Samir Movement Day, also known as the March 1st Independence Movement. So we've prepared a topic closely related to this.
대한민국만세, long live Korean independence. This chant filled the streets of Seoul 104 years ago on March 1st. Now remembered as the March 1st movement, 33 Korean nationalists first gathered in a restaurant in Seoul and read out the Declaration of Independence. This then ignited a nationwide demonstration, one done peacefully, but met with brutal repression from Japanese authorities. 26 years later, Korea finally gained independence from colonial Japan. Fast forward to the 21st century, South Korea-Japan relations haven't been always at their best. Many historical scars and unsettled issues have caused tensions, sometimes to the point where it has impeded free trade. Today, NewsGen looks at 3 questions. 1. How do the younger generation in South Korea and Japan perceive their countries' bilateral ties? How different is it from older generations? 2. How has the Korean wave, aka Hallyu, affected the Japanese new generation sentiment toward South Korea? 3. What are some ways the younger generation in both countries want to see their diplomatic relations progress?
As we just saw in our video of the day, we just came back from Samiljeol, which is a day to commemorate the March 1st movement in Korea. So here in the studio, Xiao, what does this day mean to Koreans?
Yeah, March 1st movement, or Samiljeol in Korean, was a significant event in history of South Korea's independence from the Japanese colonial rule. It was a peaceful protest that took place on the 1st of March in 1919, when Koreans from all walks of life, including students, intellectuals, everyday civilians, came out to the streets in protest against the Japanese colonial rule, demanding its independence.
Right.
On that day, 33 Korean national representatives announced the Declaration of Independence against the Japanese colonial rule. And it's a day to raise the spirit of independence and also patriotism for the Korean nationals as well.
Right, and then finally on August 15th, 1945, Korea actually gained independence from Imperial Japan. So it's been around 78 years.
Sure.
How have Korea-Japan relations been throughout these years?
Right, I mean, due to the past colonial rule, antipathy towards Japan in general, was quite severe in majority of the 78 years. Often sensitive to Japan's sort of war crimes, forced labor, and Japanese military sexual slavery. We often know it as the comfort women issue, and of course territorial claims over Korea's Dokdo Island, but more recently over trade as well. So I mean, I guess being in the same region as well, Korea-Japan relationship, diplomatic ties as well, has always been sort of intricately intertwined and quite complex in a lot of the situations. There has been always an effort to actually improve the situation politically as well. For example, the 2015 landmark constitution agreement on the issue of comfort women, but this was also nullified under the Moon Jae-in government a few years later and actually worsened the diplomatic situation. It actually contributed to Japan's decision in 2019 as well for its export limitation of export restrictions on key materials used in semiconductors and display industries of South Korea, which is a valuable and most high-tech industry for the South Korean economy. So, I mean, diplomatic ties go back and forth.
Right.
Sometimes it worsens, sometimes it becomes better. But there is an atmosphere of cooperation amongst the current government under the Yoon regime, as you've seen in the Samiljeol speech yesterday, as we talked about it earlier in our VCR. So, but we'll have to see how it works out, how the historical sort of tension get resolved in the next coming years.
And Walter, how did you see Korea-Japan relations evolve over these years?
Well, in regards to culture at least, I think it's a big step forward for the two countries. This is all the way back in 1988 when former Korean President Kim Dae-jung lifted the then 53-year-old ban on the Japanese culture, which gave access to Japanese Japanese pop, and of course the most globally well-known export to come out of Japan, almost I would say, is anime.
Yeah.
It should be noted that a lot of people my age, MZers as well, they grew up on anime, Pokemon, Dragon Ball Z, Slam Dunk, etc. Because of this exposure to both music and TV and media, etc., it made a lot of Koreans think about traveling to Japan as well. And so
Right.
these days, a lot of Koreans are traveling there.
And I think that's a really good point you made there, and that's why a lot of younger people in Korea might have a different sentiment towards Japan than older generations, right?
That's correct. So, recent studies have shown that the MZ generation are being a little bit more accepting of the people of Japan, with the survey showing that 62% of people in their 20s felt positive towards the Japanese people. But if we compare throughout the generations by taking a look at our screen, as I mentioned, 62% of people in their 20s felt positive about Japan and their people. People my age bracket, let's say 30s and 40s, just saw under 50% of approval towards the neighboring country. Now, I will say that this graph does not mean that the remaining percentage means a dislike for Japan, as for these two age groups, 31 and 36% respectively were against Japan, leaving a small percentage who have no opinion. However, if we get older, and I guess more understandably, people in their 60s and 70s showed a lower positive attitude towards Japan, and for obvious reasons, of course.
Right, and I think we've seen actually some anti-Japan sentiment even among the younger generation back in 2019. As you briefly mentioned, Xiao, there's been a nationwide boycott of Japanese products here in Korea, and this all started from a trade dispute, right? Tell us a little more about this, and since then, how have the countries rolled out their relations?
Yeah, I mean, the boycott movement was actually targeting Japanese goods and services to sort of, directly not purchase any of them and things like that. The movement was sparked, obviously, by a dispute between South Korea and Japan over wartime labor issues as well as trade policies. So in 2019, as I mentioned previously, Japan imposed export controls on 3 key chemicals that are essential for the production of semiconductors and display panels for the South Korean industries. And this move was seen as sort of a retaliation against South Korean court ruling that ordered Japanese companies to compensate Korean wartime forced laborers. So that came by, and Japan actually, sort of in retaliation, in a sense, imposed these trade restrictions. South Koreans definitely saw this sort of as a violation of free trade and an attack on their economy as well. And many began to boycott Japanese goods and services, starting with social media influencers with different hashtags going around. The situation actually has since calmed down in the recent years. And, due to the COVID-19, the tourism between the two countries have died down a bit. But apparently for the past
It's bounced
back a lot. Even on this Hamilton, I think a lot of Koreans
Exactly.
actually went on holidays to Japan and things like that.
That's why I think a lot of more people in Korea are much more comfortable consuming Japanese content and products these days, right, Walter?
Yeah, that's correct. So yes, though many people, many Koreans are on board with that No Japan movement, I remember myself back in 2019 seeing no one in Uniqlo or Muji, those clothing brands, and they were boycotting. I even remember seeing on TV a man who was destroying his Japanese-made car in protest. So they got really heated. However, it's hard to deny the impact of the Japanese media that it has on South Korea. Let's take, for instance, what I mentioned before, Slam Dunk. Now, recently, the first Slam Dunk, it's a movie based on the anime Slam Dunk series, was released in January 4, so just recently, and within a month saw 3 million ticket sales across South Korea. Now, it's actually one of the most successful movies to come out this year so far, beating the likes of Avatar: The Way of Water.
Wow.
Huge hit. I think a lot of my friends actually went to watch it as well.
It is.
I mean, I think our generation grew up watching those sort of animes and things like that. And they were big. Even like things like PlayStation, Mario Kart, they're all Japanese. They're big sort of, soft power industry as well.
Exactly. And now that we've heard from you two Korean millennials on what we think about Japan and its relations with South Korea, why don't we now add a Japanese millennial in our talks? We're now going to be hearing from what a Japanese millennial has to say on the two countries' relations. It's Nao Sakine, a student from Keio University living in Tokyo. Welcome, Nao.
Hi, 안녕하세요. My name is Nao Sakine.
konnichiwa.
안녕하세요.
Hi.
Hi. Now, as a millennial who has grown up in Japan, what do you think the common sentiment or public opinion towards Korea is like, and how has it changed much due to Hallyu?
Actually, I belong to Generation Z, but I feel like that many people in my generation have a good impression of Korea. In particular, I think that high schools and university girl students especially have a good impression. And I believe that this is mainly because of the rising popularity of K-pop idols and Korean dramas. And in terms of the TV dramas, I often see that some people who stay up late and watch all the episodes in one night, and because they are so curious about the rest of the dramas.
Right.
And also talking about the cities, I'm not sure whether you guys already know about this, but there is a city called Shin-Okubo. We can enjoy the cultural of Korea. And when I went there on weekdays, I watched so many people enjoying the Korean culture.
I see.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah, I mean, so also now there's definitely still some, I guess, anti-Korean sentiment, sort of hatred among some generations in Japan.
Yes.
Probably the older generation. Did you ever witness this? And when would you see something like this happening? Also, what do you think is causing this type of negative sentiment?
Thank you for asking questions. I think that as far as I know, I suppose that people who are in our parent generations, like 50 years old to 60 years old, and especially men, have negative and critical points of view to the Korea. And I think I usually see some people like this when I watch TVs discussing about the historical issues of Korea. And I think one of the major reasons for this is the unresolved historical issue.
Yeah, and also, what's the new generation in Japan, I guess, aka millennials and the Gen Z, wanting from Korea-Japan relations?
I believe that millennials and generation wants to see the improvement in our relationships and cooperation in economics and security and other areas. As you guys discussed about it, but according to the results of the study conducted last year, near 60% of Japanese people think that the relationship between us is important. And this figure increased by 10% from the previous year. I'm surprised to see this. And I suppose that there are two reasons for this. The first reason is that we millennials and Generation Z recognize that the cooperation between us and the strong bond is really essential for us. And also, through social working and travel experience reminds us that that Korea is a good country. So I would be happy to see that if our country and both countries moving closer, we're improving our relationships in the future.
Right. All right. Thank you so much, Now. I too hope that the new generation can lead the breakthrough in the two diplomatic relations.
Thank you very much.
Yeah, thank you for having me
Thanks, Nao.
here.
All right. Now, if I bring the discussion back to the studio, Xiong, did any point of Now fascinate you?
Yeah, quite a few points as well. It was actually good to hear a Japanese millennial talk about, the South Korea and Japan relationship. A few interesting points. Obviously, we all know Japan is actually a huge consumer of the Korean culture.
Definitely.
Historically as well, with the earlier K-dramas, K-TV shows, making huge hits, as well as K-pop in Japan. And not only that, I was actually interested to hear that the increase of positive views towards South Korea from Japanese citizens in general. And I think, I mean, obviously, the negative sentiments usually would come from the right-wing political supporters and things like that, which does exist in South Korea as well, which exists in all the countries. And I think it's a good stepping stone, for young people like us, well, Now and I and all of you, to actually recreate the sort of cooperative relationship for the future.
Definitely. And what do you think about this, Walter?
I think it's great that our media, Korean media, K-media, K-pop, K-dramas are really influencing other younger generations' opinion of Korea itself. So even though we do have this very dark history between Japan and Korea, we are able to at least mend certain areas just through media itself, through dramas, or through K-pop. I mean, there is a reason why we have Japanese K-pop artists. It's because they help that relation as well.
Right, K-content is paving the way. All right, given that we are a live morning program, we always ask our viewers questions related to our discussion topic in advance, and we use this time to share with you what they had to say. So take a look at the screen. We asked our viewers what are their views on Korea-Japan relations. Cutie Pie said, I think it's definitely gotten better thanks to anime and K-pop. I believe it's only going to get better as the entertainment industry expands in both directions. Asian Prince said Japanese people have been admiring Korean dramas and bands such as BTS, while Koreans have been admiring Japanese anime and games. Tyrus Bell said Japan colonized Korea in the past and there were issues with forced labor and comfort women. I feel like the two countries have reached frenemy status, but I feel like more should be done by Japan to reconcile with Korea. So what are your thoughts on these comments, starting with Walter?
So let me comment on Asian Prince, and I guess Cutie Pie as well, because they both talk about culture in this situation. Yes. I think it's great that they pointed out that we also consume Japanese media, and the Japanese also consume Korean media as well. So there is that relationship there. We have a mutual understanding that both of our types of media are very entertaining. I know that I love to consume certain Japanese media as well, and I'm sure K-pop, BTS, Blackpink, everyone, they're huge.
Right. And Xiao?
Yeah, I mean, if I comment on Tyrus Bell's comment as well, I think this also states something that is commonplace in discussion of the Korea-Japan relationship, that well, it says should be done by Japan to reconcile with Korea, suggesting the sort of the victim status of the Korean people. I mean, I think that is definitely something that's historically been put in place, but I think we should sort of look, forward and sort of have a futuristic outlook, and sort of reconciling the fact that the Japanese people of the younger generation might not be able to feel as much guilt as the actual sort of closer, wartime generations. So I think that's important to actually think about when sort of being in contact with the Japanese younger generation.
Definitely. And every day we do upload questions related to our discussion topic for our viewers to answer. If you want to participate, please search ArirangNews on YouTube, look into our community tab. The link is right below. Now, we've already come to the final part of our discussion for today, and Walter, just end us off with how you would like to see relations evolve.
So I think it's up to our generation of Korea and Japan to really work on this relationship together. I mean, if it is through media, fantastic. We definitely shouldn't forget the past and what our grandparents and great-grandparents had gone through. We should definitely punish the people who caused this pain to them. But I guess we need to be in a world now full of peace. I mean, we already have conflicts everywhere, Russia, Ukraine, China, Taiwan. We don't want to make things worse for our children and our children's children.
Exactly, with the geopolitical threat and everything that exists in the current climate. I think, the two East Asian superpowers, basically Korea and Japan, who also have huge soft power influence, should be able to cooperate and make something better for the future.
Right, and today we talked about how millennials and Gen Z here in Korea and Japan view bilateral relations, and we'll be here every day from 9:30 a.m. to 10 a.m. Korea time, bringing you the topics that young people are talking about. Special thanks to Kim Xiang.
My pleasure, Ian.
And Walter Lee.
Lovely to be here.
And thank you everyone for watching. We'll see you tomorrow. We are
News Generation.